Welcome, I'm Glenn Anderson with the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation. This TV series explores a variety of issues that deal with peace, social justice, and nonviolent social change. The visual arts and religion have both been around for thousands of years. Religion and the visual arts have shared histories as people have explored life and sought spiritual meaning, and as people have expressed their realities and their spiritual selves by creating visual images and objects. We call this month's TV program A Tapestry of Faiths, Interfaith Appreciation Through the Arts. The more we understand each other's religious and spiritual beliefs and practices, the more we can appreciate the diversity we share as we all share this one planet. This TV program creates an opportunity to look at and learn about a variety of the visual arts. This can help us with our own respective faith journeys. This can also help us deepen our mutual understanding and respect for various faiths. We have a huge amount of artwork with us, and we have 7 knowledgeable and inspiring guests to help us learn about and appreciate all of these things. I'm happy to welcome Jim Fulton. Jim attends All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church and has a great respect for all religious faiths. In fact, he is a former president of Interfaith Works of Thurston County, and the art he'll share with us also affirms a unifying theme in many world religions. Howard Ullery is the pastor of Lacey Community Church, and that's a congregation that has dual affiliations. Church of the Brethren is one of the historic Peace churches, and it's also affiliated with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and that's a denomination that respects the diversity of its members' beliefs and does not limit its members to adhering to a formal creed. Denise Drennan belongs to the Center for Spiritual Awakening. She makes quilts by hand in the sacred geometry style. The various shapes convey their own meanings, and we'll discuss these during the program. Kunzang Brown is deeply immersed in Tibetan Buddhism and operates Bodhi House Spirituality Center in Northeast Olympia. Bodhi House provides teaching, workshops, and space for a variety of spiritual work. Kunzang will share some Tibetan Buddhist art and explain its spiritual meanings. Muhammad Ayub is a medical doctor who is an active member of the local mosque and helps the mosque interact with the community. He's also a good friend who volunteers actively to promote peace, social justice, and a healthy environment. Lynn Ruth is an artist who works at the Treehouse Art Center upstairs from Bucks Fifth Avenue at 209 Fifth Avenue Southeast in downtown Olympia. Lynn is working on the Sacred Art exhibit and the World Sacred Art Festival on Saturday, March 7, sponsored by Interfaith Works of Thurston County, and we'll discuss that during the program. Lynn attends the Center for Spiritual Awakening. Julie Barrett Ziegler is rooted in the Catholic tradition and has studied religious icons throughout all of history up to the present day. She'll help us understand religious icons not limited to the Christian tradition, and she often teaches workshops about icons and using the arts for spiritual growth, especially at St. Placid Priory in Lacey. So welcome to all 7 of you. It's amazing to get all you folks and your artwork together, and I'm looking forward to a really enjoyable time and really informative. Lynn, let's check with you first about the event that brought to mind the occasion for doing this. Tell us about the Sacred Art exhibit.
It's going to take place at the Men Art Center at South Puget Sound Community College. It's in a beautiful gallery, and it's going to be a sensational display. And this is a sample of what's going to happen there. But what I'd like to recognize is what Interfaith does for our community. Mm-hmm. And Interfaith Works brings about these kinds of events. The World Sacred Music Festival brings people from all over the world together to recognize the beauty and the joy of music. And now we have an opportunity to see the beauty and the joy of art. So we have these 2 things together, hand in hand. The center's ours for the day is March 7th, but we also have
Saturday.
But we have the display up for an entire week, so people can come in and find out about what is inspirational, what is important to individual faith, and that's essential, I think.
That's great. And the World Sacred Music Festival this year is the 5th annual.
Yes. Yes.
So they've been doing it, and this is the first year they've added the visual arts?
No, last year I put it up, but we didn't have the center, and I'd like to talk about that a little later about how I put it up.
Okay, so it's expanded this year, and the things that we'll be talking about and the people present will be participating, and it'll be a great thing. We want to let people know they can contact Interfaith Works at www.interfaith, then you have to do the -works.org, and their phone is 357-7224. I agree with you how important Interfaith Works is. They bring people of different faiths together and congregations and other faith-based organizations. The Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation is an affiliate member because we also are very broadly interfaith.
Also the Crop Walk.
And Crop Walk and a number of other entities.
All kinds of wonderful things.
Thanks. We'll talk some more about that at the very end of the show. What we'll do is have some opportunity now for each of the guests to talk about the art that they've done and the insights and the meaning that they have from it. Let's start with Jim Fulton. You created an amazingly beautiful needlepoint that represents a number of religious faiths. Would you show us what it is and tell us what that means?
Well, thank you, Glenn. I call this the Phoenix Circle because it is a circle of faiths. I discovered needlepoint as a child in my grandmother's parlor when she had needle-pointed chairs. And the idea of being able to develop a pattern out of little blobs of color and get a rich pattern was fascinating to me. But it wasn't until I became an adult that I began to actually practice it. This particular piece evolved from my participation in All Souls Unitarian Universalist community and in Interfaith Works, because we had the center symbol here is the All Souls icon with the Phoenix of Rebirth in the standard UU chalice. But then with Interfaith Works, I began to see our participation in so many different faiths, how they brought together so many different ideas. Just quickly, starting with at the top with the Christian cross, the symbol for humanism, the Sanskrit Om of Hinduism, the nine-pointed star of Baha'i the yin-yang symbol of Taoism, the angel Moroni from the temple of the LDS Church, the khanda of the Sikhs, the pentagram of the Wiccans, the star and crescent of Islam, the torii of Shinto, the all-seeing hand of Jainism, the Star of David of Judaism, the mandala or medicine wheel of Native Americans, the lotus of Sufism, the wheel of life of Buddhism. This is Buddhism. This is Hinduism.
Oh, I see.
Sorry.
That's right, sure.
The symbol for harmony, or Ho, of Confucianism. These symbols I gathered quickly from the internet. I'm now fine discovering that I might choose different symbols now because of the research I've been doing.
Thank you. That's it's beautiful and it says a lot. I hope we can convey that through the work we do in the community.
I hope so too.
So, Howard, you've brought 2 banners that you had made. I wonder if you could tell us about these.
The 2 banners represent symbolism that is oftentimes prevalent in Christianity. The one on the left is of a dove, and in Christianity the dove can represent spirit. It also is the dove of peace. That is particularly meaningful to me because in my particular understanding, we emphasize the witness and example of Jesus in making peace. The other banner is a seasonal one, centered on the Easter season. It speaks of rebirth, renewal, resurrection, light and shadow, life are present, and the mix of colors and the movement of form are all things that speak to our tradition.
Now, you made these, and these have been displayed in the sanctuary of the congregation where you're the pastor.
That's correct, and typically they're made as a pair. There are 2 of them that hang in the front and provide a centerpiece, a focal piece. And one thing that comes to mind for me, Glenn, Francis of Assisi once said something like, preach the gospel at all times, preach your sacred story at all times, and if necessary, use words. And so I believe that the visual arts and other forms that we use can speak in deep ways to us that we cannot touch with words.
And you change these sometimes during the church season?
Oh, we change these regularly.
Calendar?
And part of the advantage, these banners are made of paper. And part of the reason for that is they're temporary, and they allow us to change them according to season, according to theme of worship. Sometimes we'll use a banner for a week or 2, and sometimes it may last for a little longer, but it allows for great flexibility.
Now, you made these, and you designed both of these yourself?
That's correct.
And you tell us about the creative process as you design and make these.
Glenn, I'll tell you, I don't consider myself an artist, so I don't know that I can articulate the creative process. It is just something that if I allow a writing or an image to come to me, I just kind of let it sit there for a little bit and develop. And then I might sit down and doodle on paper, and eventually it will lead to a form that I can translate into a larger form in the banner.
Okay. So. I want to show one thing that a friend had made over 30 years ago. It's a photo of, or not a photo, excuse me. It's a reproduction of some artwork that a friend had seen and painted. Jesus breaking a gun, and it conveys her sense that the message of Jesus was a very decisive no to violence and offering a new way. So it's a pretty startling image compared to the images of Jesus you see in most churches, but it also conveys a useful meaning. So I just wanted to offer that as here's yet another thing, and so much can be done. We want to check with Denise to find out about what you had brought. Tell us about the quilt.
My quilt here is I developed after I read a little bit about sacred geometry. Now, sacred geometry is an ancient teaching that many cultures, many religions have taught that thousands of years ago, because they call it sacred because they find all of life, down to the molecule, the DNA, has sacred geometry form to it. And this picture depicts the aura around our body. Scientifically, we know that every living thing has energy. And this is a depiction of, in ancient sacred geometry, the aura, the light body around the body. The star in the middle represents the sun and the earth. The second form there is actually a 20-faceted globe form. It's called an icosahedron, and that represents the beginning of new consciousness, or a baptism into a new way of life. And then the sphere represents the Christ consciousness. So here we have a picture of a human beginning a new consciousness, growing into the Christ consciousness.
And what's the origin of the design, the creativity of that?
Again, the sacred geometry it's in many cultures that have taught that thousands of years ago. It's in many cultures. I was just talking with Julie, and she said her icons have sacred geometry to it as well.
I think we'll be seeing some similarities as things that you folks have said as we were preparing for the program that show up again and again. And you designed this particular quilt?
I designed this quilt, and I do have a copyrighted pattern for sale. I certainly do.
And then, is there another project you have in mind?
I do have another project that is a queen-size quilt for a bed with sacred geometry figures in it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks. Does anybody have any questions for any of the three folks who've gone first, for Jim or Howard or Denise? Any questions or comments or anything? So, okay. Well, these can percolate, and we want to move on then. Kun Song, you brought two beautiful pieces that will be new to most people watching the show. But you come out of this from a Tibetan Buddhism background that most people probably don't know much about.
Well, I don't know about that, but these are Tibetan Buddhist paintings. They're called thangkas. And originally, thangkas were scroll paintings. They could be rolled up and transported easily so that yogis who were on the move could take them with them. I've brought two types tonight. This one over here is a historical thangka. The one, it depicts Padmasambhava, who was the person that instilled Buddhism in Tibet. He's surrounded by his disciples, and the books on his side are all of his teachings. The thangka behind me is more of a metaphorical type thangka, and it depicts Mount Meru, which is considered the center of the universe in Buddhist cosmology. At the top, it shows the God realms, and then below it shows the other realms of existence.
So in a society where people were not terribly literate, visual images can convey meanings or be a teaching device or an object for spiritual
Awakening.
reflection. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very important in that respect. And each thangka is in its own self a complete teaching.
You had mentioned to me on the phone that these were like from the very beginning, you call it the old school?
These are from the Nyingma tradition
And
of Tibetan
when is this?
Buddhism.
How historically, what century about?
8th century.
Wow.
8th century.
So that's real early.
Very early.
Yeah.
And the fellow Padmasambhava in the large historical thangka, he was actually bringing Buddhism into Tibet at 767.
When we talked on the phone, you mentioned how some thangkas convey the image of some person or deity that's or the sense of it is they embody a characteristic.
Correct.
And tell us some more about what that means and how that would be used.
Well, in Vajrayana Buddhism, which is a part of Nyingma, the Thangkas represent the embodiment or the light of wisdom. So we would look at it, particularly with this Thangka behind me, we would look at this and we would see complete teachings, different aspects of wisdom.
And then somebody would be able to use that to help them deepen their own
Yes.
understanding and their spiritual
Yes.
connection as they aspire
Yes.
to the
Yes.
qualities being conveyed.
Yes, and particularly with this Thangka, the central figure, Padmasambhava, is both a historical and somewhat mythical person. We do a practice called Guru Yoga, where we imagine ourselves as Padmasambhava, the embodiment of compassion and enlightenment, and we try to bring those qualities into ourselves. When we were talking, I used the phrase, fake it till you make it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, when we were preparing for the TV program.
Yes.
That's right, yes. So the
Yes.
idea is you practice, and the practicing with the intention of developing that characteristic helps you develop the characteristic.
Exactly, exactly.
Very
So
good.
does your faith help you understand the meaning of these? Do they discuss this? How do you know the meaning?
There are a lot of teachings about it, yes, a lot of teachings. Even the hand gestures have specific meaning. The implements that they're holding have specific meaning. The garments that they're wearing have specific meaning.
And we may see that with the icons when we get to your turn, because you had mentioned that to me on the phone when we were preparing. Thank you, Kuzan.
That was
That's
really
great.
interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Go
I
ahead.
just do want to say that I am not the artist. These were painted by a Tibetan master.
Okay.
Yeah.
But thank you for sharing those with us. Muhammad, you've got some interesting things with you, and I wonder if you can share these. A number of things to show. Tell us about what you brought.
I'm just happy to be here and learn from you all.
You may stand if it helps to
Yes,
show
yes.
these better, beautiful items.
You know, in Islam, an Islamic art and art is not just limited to what the religions is, because the religion is practiced in so many countries that there's an amalgamation and cross-pollination of stuff. There's not a lot of illustrations because the Quran itself is not a book of like narrations and once upon a time the story happened. So there's not a lot of illustrations. So painting in the sense of human figures and statues was not, was not well developed. But carpet making and prayer rugs is something that was very well developed. This is something that was given by my grandmother, and it is originally from Turkey, and it was hand woven. The prayer rugs are supposed to help you to concentrate and not be too colorful and distracting. It's supposed to be something that, is awe-inspiring and takes you closer to God. That was one of them, and I have another one which my mother brought for me, and this was from Mecca when she went to the holy city where Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba. And
Hold it up a little higher.
a little higher. Yeah, and essentially everything is hand woven, and these are becoming a symbol of going back to the traditions and not having the McDonaldization of culture, and so many people are trying to go back to the old way of doing things.
But it's not an old-fashioned way, it's a revered traditional way.
Yes.
And which is very different from the way the world does things now.
Yes.
Where you-
Now there's just mass production, and everything is, made in some, God forbid, like a third world country where sweatshops are being run, and then it is sent over here to consumers. So anyway, let me not get on a further tangent.
But these are good handmade things
Yes.
with integrity.
Yes. This is from Kashmir. My father and mother had visited when I was
Hold
a
it
little
still so
child.
the camera can see it.
And it is hand painted. And as you see, the mosaic is the same one kind of picture is repeated all over. And this kind of art is called arabesque, where or not this particular, there's other examples of it, where the same pattern is repeated all over the side of the mosque or all over the veranda or the entryway. And essentially it is reminding us that God is infinite and, sort of taking us towards a path of thinking more about spiritual stuff. Yeah. This,
What's it made out of?
this is actually made out of wood, and the dyes and all are painted, and then the glaze is applied, and then it's heated, so it seals. Yeah. This is a mosaic pattern from Morocco, and I think some of the kids dropped it, so it's missing some. But if someone feels it, you can feel the individual stones that have been set. And once again, it's geometrical patterns and shapes. Everything is symmetrical,
I see it.
which is very typical of the architecture. If you look at Taj Mahal or the Blue Mosque or the Blue Mosque in Turkey or the Hamra Palace or the mosque in Cordova, the architecture has to be symmetrical. Right should match left, and there's also a well-developed system of calligraphy where you see the door of the Kaaba.
That's on the table here in front.
Yes. It's a depiction of the Kaaba, which is in Mecca, which is a hollow cube. This is where Abraham and Ishmael built a house of worship. It was also the place where Adam and Eve met when God threw them out of heaven, and then they asked for repentance, and that was the place that they got repentance. So each of the doors is made of 900 kilos of gold. That's about 1,800 pounds of in our system. And those inscriptions and all the other various verses of the Holy Quran and 99 names of God.
And this is located where?
In Mecca, in Saudi
Mecca.
Arabia.
Okay.
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Yes.
I looked at this before we started producing the program, before we started taping it. It's much more detailed than the camera will be able to pick up, I'm sure, as was this beautiful platter, but very elaborate.
Yeah, and I brought that because that's nothing about Islam or Prophet Muhammad. It's the place where Adam and Eve met, and it's the place where Abraham and Ishmael built the place of worship. So it's a real symbol of interfaith cultures.
And when you mentioned when you mentioned the calligraphy, I mentioned to you that I have one that was given to me that I wanted to share with people. This was given to me by a Sufi Muslim sheikh in near the National FOR office in New York. That it was Tosin Bayrak is the sheikh, and we had the Olympia FOR and the National FOR and others had collaborated with the order that he's with in helping to resettle students from Bosnia who were endangered during the war there. And he gave me this because in appreciation for what the Olympia FOR had done. This is calligraphy, and in Arabic, the lettering goes from right to left, whereas we do left to right in English. But this calligraphy is done symmetrically, so it runs both ways. This was done by the most famous Turkish calligrapher, whose name I don't know, but I do know the name of the man who gave it to us. But I thought I would share that. And what this is calligraphy. It's Arabic writing some of the many names of God, the compassionate one, the merciful one, and so forth.
And that is so true about Islam, is that like you mentioned, that the visual arts take different forms, and not necessarily as in statues or sculptures, but in gardens or great fountains or symmetrical designs of architecture, music, poetry, carpet making, rugs, things like that.
And things that help us connect to the infinite, as you mentioned. And on this, I enjoy seeing this. This is up in my living room at home. And I can appreciate the many ways of understanding the many qualities of God. So thanks for sharing that. Does anybody have any comments or questions on these last two or any of the first three?
Just that we spoke about the geometric patterns here, and in my reading of sacred geometry, the temples, buildings, as you said, they were balanced. Their use, when the architect built them, they would use the pi ratio, which is a sacred geometry ratio. It's the mathematical portion of geometry, to design and build these buildings. So they're in perfect symmetry.
Yes. And also, I've been in buildings where thousands of people could get together and listen to one speech, but the echo carries, without a microphone or anything of
Yes.
that sort. And I myself tested it, and first I thought it was hocus pocus until I actually went over there and spoke, and just the amount of amplification that is there naturally.
Yes.
Just in the acoustic design
Yes.
of,
That's right.
of the space.
Yeah.
Wow.
Correct geometry.
Very good.
I have been collecting symbols of different faiths, and what struck me is that in Islam, in Chinese religions, and in India, the calligraphy for various words is amazingly beautiful, but it doesn't fit with the Western mind, which wants to go in one direction or another. The letters flow all over the page, and it doesn't matter where they land. It ends up with a beautiful design. The letters are there; they just might not be where you expect them to be.
Well, that in itself is a good metaphor for spiritual
Yes.
exploration. Thank you. Lynn, tell us about the art that you brought.
Well, I brought 2 pieces, and I used to be a
And these were
photographer
over
prior to doing art, and I consider these 2 prophetic pieces. The one I wanted to discuss first was the dove. That particular image was a black and white photograph, and it was a very gray photograph, and it was actually of a seagull, and the wingtips disappeared, and I went ahead and I thought, well, I'll print it blue, and I took white out and white out it around it, and then I added the saying. But I was in my 20s when I did that. A few years later, I ended up with a dove that looks identical to that dove, and I've had this dove 15 years. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a meaningful thing. I wrote on it, "Faith is the bird that feels the light and sings while the dawn is still dark." Mm-hmm. Now, I think that we all have dark times in our life, but that our faith, no matter what particular belief system, will carry us through as we visualize God as that presence that comforts us and walks with us and will be with us in our dark times. And I think that is so important that we realize that, because we are in dark times, but we will be okay. It will be okay with that faith. The other one is really amazing. I don't know if they can see it. I studied that and I thought, I don't understand it, but then now I do understand it. The figure is standing on the sand, and in the reflection on the sand is an hourglass shape, and it looks like a shape that is when we have a game and we turn the glass over and the sand goes through it. If you look at that particular figure, I just told my niece, go out there and I want to take a picture. And she stood there with her arms stretched out, and she's standing on the sands of time, and the sun is setting in the distance. And this is her life, and this is the event, and this is close to the end of her life. And so we now know that we're in the hourglass. We're now standing on the sands of time. And how did we do? Are we doing okay? What could we do better? But I think it's so interesting that the geometry that created that picture is identical to the quilt that it sits by. Identical. So it's just real interesting.
When we talked on the phone to prepare for the program, you said that reality is bigger than any of us, and you've urged people to stay open to others, and that, of course, relates to the theme of the program. Tell us more.
Well, we cannot put a block up in our mind and believe that we are anywhere better or worse than anyone else, and that God is bigger than what we realize, that He has put together a plan that reaches many people, all over the world. There's a hook line out there, and it's for whoever happens to grab a hold of it. And it's a rescue operation. It's trying to teach us how to love. And it isn't just this faith and this faith. It is whatever faith will help you to find peace inside of yourself and develop the faith and become a servant of the Most High God, whoever that is. But I honestly believe that we now need to come into relationship with that God as we see that God, and love each other and not succumb to hatred or to jealousy is probably one of the biggest issues. It's not worth it to have jealousy. We do not understand the whole story. We weren't given the whole story.
And the flip side of the jealousy is some humility, and that comes out as a recurring theme in quite a lot of religions, where people are urged to find their appropriate space in the world, their appropriate place in the world, and not try to be a big shot at other people's expense, or not
That's
to
correct.
have the hubris to overreach, but there's a proportionality.
Right.
And you see proportionality in the composition of all the art forms we have here, and I mean, this stuff works at multiple levels.
I would call that order. There is an order.
Yeah.
There is a particular order.
Yeah. Julie, thank you. Julie, let's talk about the art that you brought. You brought a lot of stuff, and it works well. Tell us why you brought so many things on this display. Tell us that, and then get into these.
I brought a lot of icons because there's something very profound about seeing the images in concert with each other. Most Orthodox churches have beautiful iconostasis screens with icons that are go all the way up to the ceiling, and it's meant to represent the communion of saints that surround us and that intercede for us and that are part of our spiritual foundation. So I wanted to bring more than one so that we could have a sense of that.
And we'll see a lot of these. Start someplace and tell us. We won't have time to discuss all in detail, but give us some of the sense of things.
Well, I also brought candlelight because until the last few hundred years, without electricity, icons were meant to be seen by candlelight in sacred spaces. They were meant to be illuminated by natural light, by the light of fire. So even though this is in a studio setting, we still have some fire.
Mm-hmm.
The icons that I brought represent some ancient tradition and some newer icons. I've done all of them except two, and I wanted to say a little bit about what an icon is. Icona is the Greek word for image, and the icons as we know them historically go back before Christianity. The Egypto-Chaldeans had images of the deceased on top of the sarcophagi to remember them, and they would take another panel home with them to remember. And the early Christians, as they were practicing and creating liturgy, had icon images with them. And it was wonderful to have the image of Christ or Mary or one of the saints in the small community that would gather and celebrate liturgy together. And the movement of icons and the movement of the Christian tradition mirror each other. All around the Mediterranean, there's this amazing radius of growing outward as the disciples, tried to spread the good news, bringing the icons with them. And then they would go to a new community, which would also want an image of holiness.
And is it like a teaching aid to help convey not just the story, but the deeper meaning or the spirit of the movement? Or tell us.
Well, we say that we write icons. I write icons because they are a visual depiction of the gospel. It's like someone would write the words of Scripture, and that would be one way of presenting Scripture. But an iconographer makes the visual image of the same Scripture, kind of like the illustration of the Scripture. But because it's illuminated and it's made so specially and with such reverence, we say that we write it because we're writing a visual representation of the gospel.
When Kunzang was talking about the placement of the hands and things, or somebody, is that right? You'd mentioned that, right? That shows up in these icons as well?
Well, symbolic language is present in a lot of sacred art, all over the world, all through time. Sacred art is not about what matches the colors of your couch. It's about inviting the viewer or the participant to go deeper, to go inward. Mm-hmm. And it's always about invitation to be more reverent, more reflective, to contemplate that conversation we want to have with the divine.
Mm-hmm.
And so things like the hand placement and or the curtain.
Well, icons, there's nothing accidental about what's in an icon. Every hand mudra, the movement of the face, the folds of the garment, the colors of the garments, the architecture, the landscape, whatever is present in an icon is part of what we call symbolic language. And 1,000 years ago, a person would look at one of these and know what it was about, because that was a pre-literate cultural time, and language was seen as much as it was spoken. And every single thing that's in an icon has an image and a meaning and portrays part of a story.
Can you tell us some examples from what you have here?
Yeah, I can. This is one that I did. I brought two of one scripture so that you could see the difference. A lot of us know the parable of the sower, which talks about someone going out to sow seed. Some of it falls on rocky ground, some of it falls and the birds eat it, some doesn't get its root structure going very well, and other seed does flourish and grow. And that's the metaphor for holy teaching or holy scripture of all faiths, not just the Christian tradition. And that parable shows up over and over again in every indigenous culture with all kinds of faith practice. In the Christian tradition, it's usually meant to be Christ sowing the seeds of the gospel, sowing the seeds of the word. And there are two representations. The one on the far left was done by a wonderful...
The far
right
yeah.
was done by a wonderful calligrapher, iconographer who has worked on a very special new Bible, the first handwritten Bible in 500 years. It's called the St. John's Bible. And this is one of the illuminations, or pictures, from the Bible. And in it you can see Christ spreading these seeds, and you can see it's a very realistic, but still interesting. You'll notice Jesus is not wearing a long robe. This Christ is the Dorothy Day Christ. He's got jeans on.
Yeah, it has
So,
very modern working
modern,
class.
but in traditional style.
Yeah.
This one right here is one I just finished for a man who wanted to go deeper in his practice of Celtic Christianity, and he wanted a Celtic Christ. So we talked about some of his images, and I don't know if you can see them from here, but...
You produced that?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what we do. There's a Celtic cross behind Christ, that's his halo, and there's a tiny little sparrow. This is a Scottish sparrow that whispers truth into the ear of Christ, because Christ is about the truth. I don't know if you can see it behind this one. There's also a wild goose feather. Wild geese are all over Celtic lore, and they're about transformation. Well, Christ is about transformation. Mm-hmm. So there's a wild goose feather, which, by the way, is over the gospel. Originally, the gospels were transcribed with quills. Mm. And this symbol is saying, I come to be among you as your brother. I come to be family to you. Each mudra, each hand symbol in the icons is speaking, saying something, as are all of the other elements of the icons. The one of Mary, which has a blue background and she's holding the globe, is one I just finished. It's called Mary, Mother of the World, and it's about the feminine principle of compassionate care for the earth. Wow. Mm. And she's holding the world, but you can see she's not a lightweight. Her gaze is very penetrating, and she's saying very convictingly, take care of the earth. And you'll notice one hand is covering the earth, and the other is covered in her veil. That's because we're supposed to be about that work. Her other hand is us.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my goodness. That's fantastic.
And the 12 tribes of Israel are represented by the 12 flames around the world.
Wow.
The one in the center is one that's in one of our chapels at St. Michael Parish, where most of my icons are. This is from a copy of a 12th century icon. It's called Our Lady of Tender Mercies. And it's just about that beautiful tenderness of mother and child, you know, where his cheek touches hers. And it's a nativity icon. And it's part of a grouping. There's a nativity icon, there's also a crucifixion icon. And in the center, in our chapel of repose, is a beautiful old tabernacle which holds the consecrated Eucharist. So it's about visual theology. There's the birth of Christ, the death of Christ, and then the resurrection and the living Christ that we get to share in liturgy, in Eucharist.
This is fascinating. Tell us something about the eyes. The eyes are so penetrating, and you had mentioned the eyes when you looked at the Mary holding the earth.
The eyes of the icon, you know, we say the eyes are the window of the soul?
That's correct.
Well, icons are windows. They're meant to be not decorative art, but to be portals, to be windows. And the sacred image that's present there is meant to be speaking to us. It's sort of beckoning, saying, come, pay attention, listen. And in our culture, which is so fast and so loud and so permeated with so much stimulus, the icons are about being reverent, being quiet, coming to a sense of peace and listening, which our culture doesn't do very well anymore. And in the writing of them, I also get a wonderful sense of peace, and writing icons is part of my prayer practice. And the eyes are about being present.
What do you mean, right?
Actually, well, yeah, it's like when you really meet someone and you really pay attention and you're receiving them in reverence, you look at them. So that's what the eyes are about.
Let me sit this before I cough again.
How old is that? Is that very, very, very old? I mean,
Which one?
the icons, I've seen some of these icons before in books.
Well, this is a copy of a Russian icon. It's a very different style. That one was given to me. The one on the far corner there is a combination of old and new, trying to speak to both. The rest that I've done, some are traditional, the Great Big Nativity, but the Mary Mother of the World and the new Christ are, they're kind of new theology.
Well, I know that you do workshops sometimes at St. Placid Priory in Lacey, and the priory there is very good about having enough time for your workshops to help people get into it. I appreciate what you've done in just a few minutes.
Yeah, it's hard to bring a whole day or weekend workshop into
Right.
this much time.
People could connect with St. Placid Priory because
Yeah.
I know you have
It's a wonderful
workshops
place.
on iconography every now and then.
There are many people that teach there. It's St. Placid's Priory and Spirituality Center is a very welcoming place for a lot of faith, discipline, and practice. But we teach, I teach a course called Sketchbook to God, which is about prayer practice and art together.
Yeah.
There are programs for all ministry leaders in the area, prayer practice, contemplative practice, centering prayer, all kinds of art.
Do any of us have any comments or reflections or questions about anything that we've been exposed to during this time?
Your pieces, when you go to worship, do you bring your piece to the service?
We
Is
do.
Is that a common practice?
Yes, these pieces normally hang in our shrine room, our meditation room, and so they're always with us. And the ones that are rolled could be taken anywhere easily. Yeah.
They're beautiful. And you use these for your services sometimes? You do use these in
Yeah,
services?
some of these I actually borrowed from the sanctuary where they're hanging. And some of them are in my home, some of them I bring with me to the class work that I do. The ones that are installed in the church are there for, there are two that I made that are of the Annunciation that are in our 24-hour adoration chapel. Anyone can come in any time of the day or night and just
meditate.
sit, just be with the Spirit of God.
Wow, that's
Any other? Thank
fantastic.
you. Yes.
Yes, I have a question for Jim, for Kunzang. I'm very fascinated by Buddhism and very fascinated by the silent part of it and the meditation and all. Find a lot of similarities. But I want to understand why the wheel is like a symbol of Buddhism. Could you explain to me a little bit more?
My understanding is that it's very similar to the yin-yang in Taoism, and the wheel is found in many other cultures. I think it depicts, at least in part, the cyclic nature of the universe, the way things repeat in regular patterns, and different things flow together in.
Is there any significance of the 8 spokes?
That I do not know, so I will have to defer to somebody that's more knowledgeable.
So will I. We call that the wheel of Dharma. And you hear sometimes of Shakyamuni, I can't speak, the Buddha's teachings as turning the wheel of Dharma.
Wow.
His first teaching was the first turning of the wheel of Dharma.
Could you just define the word dharma? That's the teaching?
Dharma are the teachings, Dharma is the path.
Thank you.
It may even go back to the old ancient Ouroboros, which is the snake swallowing its tail, which is basically the notion of constant rebirth and renewal.
Anything else that we might have observed or felt during this hour in terms of either interfaith collaboration, similarities, differences, relationships, or the value of interfaith understanding?
I think we were talking about ways we can link together. You know, like I'm Christian, but I want to make links with other people, and I don't want to leave the communication lines open so that I can understand and they can understand, and there can be something productive. And I think that has to do with even computer links. You know, we're talking about a world of networking. And it's important that we talk and understand instead of try not to make judgments.
Sometimes words themselves can get in our way. They become barriers between us, whereas art is more unified. It's more accessible, even if you don't accept the underlying theology. You can see the symbolism and the significance of the art, despite the differences in culture.
It's true. Holy images move our spirits.
And in each, there was mention of sacred geometry. And that reminds me that at the core of all of our spiritual traditions is the concept of compassion and loving kindness. So in this way, it again affirms that connectedness.
All of the faiths, in one way or the other, affirm the golden rule in some form. And that ties them all together in a very powerful way, just like the art.
When we were preparing for the program on the telephone, you mentioned a quotation from Rumi, from Hafiz. Hafiz, the Persian poet, Persia, which is now Iran. And what you said is, God courts us with the beauty of this world. Like, whoa.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So there's one to remember.
Very good.
So let's put in another plug for the World Sacred Music Festival and the Sacred Art Exhibit. Saturday, March 7, all day, South Puget Sound Community College in the Minert Center, and the art will be up for, you said, a week?
1 week.
Starting when, or what's the time frame?
Well, you need to bring your art pieces in on the 6th if you want to be a part of it. And they will be up for 1 week, yes.
So it's the week following that?
Yes,
then,
the week following,
Okay.
yes.
That's good. And your contact point for this, or Interfaith Works would be, or there's the website, www.olisacredmusic.org.
You know, we do have on the website now, I talked to Scott Stevens, and he put a link to the sacred art, so that'll give you some more information about it. That's the website. World Sacred Music Festival.
Yeah. And we also do encourage people to connect with www.interfaith-works.org.
Right.
There's another Interfaith Works that I think is in Indiana or someplace, and so ours has the hyphen in it.
Oh, really?
So it comes to here, and that's in area code 360-357-7224.
Right.
And they do such wonderful work.
Yep.
And I know many of us are connected with them already, and Jim had been president for some time, a while back. I'm glad that we were able to spend this hour. This has been just wonderful, very rich. The program that we've been, that you folks have been watching has been featuring a variety of religious and spiritual paths, traditions. Certainly not all of them. We have 7 guests. We could have had 27 guests and still not covered everything. But each of the guests has offered very distinct pieces of art that flow from and express their respective faiths, and in many cases the bigger picture beyond that. We can affirm each of the things that we've seen, and we can affirm what we've heard in all of that diversity. Just as we appreciate the beauty of an entire tapestry and still see the unique color and the unique texture of each individual thread in the tapestry, also in the same way we can see the big picture of diversity within our communities, religious and spiritual communities, and also at the same time appreciate the distinctness and the unique value and meaning that each religious faith and each work of art offers to us. Each pathway leads to a whole world of meaning, and all of them together then add to a whole lot richer experience for all of us. As a community, as a nation, and as a world, we can respect the diversity of people's search for beauty and meaning and rich spiritual lives. So I want to thank Jim Fulton, Howard Ullery, Denise Drennan, Kunzang Brown, Muhammad Ayub, Lynn Ruth, and Julie Barrett Ziegler. I'm glad we had this time together. If you want to reach any of the guests or find out more about their own activities or faith connections, contact the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation and we can let you know how to connect with them. For this information or for information about a lot of issues that relate to peace, social justice, nonviolent social change, you can contact the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation at 360-491-9093 or our website www.olyfor.org. We're all one human family. We all share one planet. We can make the world a better place, but we all have to do our part, and the world needs what you have to offer. Thanks.